your seats. I do have one small piece of business, and that is a couple of you have noticed that you have 2 participant satisfaction forms and 1 faculty evaluation forms. The participant satisfaction form is actually 1 form. It's in 2 parts. They are different. So if you would fill out both of those, the faculty evaluation form and your participant profile, that would be really, really good. Thank you. All right, we're going to get started now. Our next speaker is Dr. Nancy Thompson. Dr. Thompson is the Executive Director of the Elizabeth McGown Training Institute at Morningside Ministries, mmlearn.org in San Antonio. During her career, Dr. Thompson has primarily served disenfranchised populations as a rehabilitation counselor, public information director, and a community education director in a variety of settings, including public education, higher education, manufacturing, and more recently, long-term care. Dr. Thompson with Learn is one of our primary partners in our Geriatric Education Center and has many healthcare professionals right now across the nation watching us today on our live internet streaming feed. Dr. Thompson is an expert in the training of family caregivers of older adults, hence her topic for today, the challenges of caregiving.
Well, I'm very excited to be here today. I was also very excited when I met Joanne, and her family was, her mom and dad were at Morningside Ministries. And, you know, it feels so good when someone says, my family had such a great experience in long-term care, because that doesn't always happen. So thank you for sharing that. I also wanted to thank Mark and Barbara and Dr. Saunders for making this such an easy thing to participate in. Oops, we do that always. And no, this is one of my heroes at Morningside Ministries. His name is Duke. He's 97 years old. Every day when I go to work, there he is out watering the plants. One of the reasons I really admire him and am fond of him is that he was a caregiver until recently. His wife was diagnosed with dementia when he was 90, and he cared for her until he was 97. And he is out every day taking care of the gardens there. He also makes jewelry. He makes bracelets out of, I think, Indian hawthorn seeds and rosaries out of the same seed. He also makes crosses. And then in the evening, do you know what he does? He practices Wii bowling so he can be competitive in the competitions at the meadows. So, and the reason I have his picture is that he's also a male model. Because when we were doing some print material on how to do wheelchair transfers, we needed someone who was handsome and would follow instructions and who could do this. And of course, he was the perfect candidate for that. He is not in a wheelchair, though. If you're not familiar with Morningside Ministries, let me tell you just a little bit about who we are and what we do. This is the original campus for Morningside Ministries. It's the Manor. It was established about 50 years ago as a faith-based organization. The founding faiths are Episcopalian, Methodist, and Presbyterian. And we've continued as a nonprofit over the years, and while we, of course, are supportive and open to all faiths, those 3 faith groups have been continued to be very involved with us. Now, Duke lives here in the Meadows. That is a facility that has fine dining. It's the best food that you could eat in San Antonio. I'd welcome you to come. And then Joanne's parents were here at Chandler. It's in the Monte Vista area in downtown San Antonio. It also has an adult senior activity center for people in the community, but primarily it serves the residents in assisted living, in independent living, and in skilled care who are at the Chandler. And then the last one is the newest campus. It's at Minger Springs, and it's in Burning, and it has the same kind of setup of comprehensive care. And that campus, I think, has only been open about 4 years. But you know, most people will never go to a facility like Morningside. And because we do have a board who's interested in all older adults and the care that they receive, one of the questions was, how could we serve older adults? And this majority of older adults, which really is about 95% who will never go to a nursing home facility. And who cares for those people? Sometimes folks say, well, you know, kids don't care about their parents anymore. They all go to a nursing home. Well, you know that's simply not true. Most people are going to be cared for in their home. They're going to be cared for in the home of a loved one. And the decision was the best way that we could serve older adults was to provide free care for caregivers. Not free care, free training about care. Okay, so the mission of the Elizabeth McGowan Training Institute, mmlearn.org, is to provide training for caregivers to enhance the quality of care of older adults. And I really like this photo because 30% of the caregivers of older adults are older adults. And sometimes we forget that. But we try to provide free, and we do provide free online training for family caregivers, for healthcare providers, and I would say a lot of our free training is for entry-level personnel such as CNAs, for home healthcare personnel. And then we also have some training for pastoral care providers, because when we were doing the research, we found that lots of families will initially turn to their faith, to their church, their synagogue, their temple, to say, what's available, what should I do? And we don't always provide the training and the preparation that clergy need to be informed. And a lot of volunteers also serve in those capacities, and we haven't always done a good job in keeping them informed about what's available for older adults. So here's our little training institute, and it's on our campus at Babcock and St. Cloud. Seats about 20 people, but you know how this actually started? We wondered how we would start more efficiently training our own staff, because we have those 3 campuses. They're operating 7 days a week. They're operating 24 hours a day. We probably have over 600, probably even close to 700 personnel. How do you keep them trained? Well, our trainer was forgetting what she was teaching, what she had said at the last one, and we finally said, well, we think we could use distance learning. And the way we were introduced to that was by UTMB when we established a telemedicine clinic at one of our campuses. So that was our first introduction to distance learning. And we were doing primarily video conferencing from this site to our other campuses. And now we have over 100 free videos that are available to you online. And almost every topic, I think, that you could think about. If you go to our website, MMLearn, this is what you're going to see. It's changed a little bit because we're always updating it. But on the front page, you'll generally see 3 buttons. One is the one that just says free videos. And then there's another one that says, Ask the Geriatrician. Ask the Geriatrician is a monthly webcast that we do, and we have geriatricians primarily from the Health Science Center who come and speak. But this week we had Dr. Raji from UTMB, who's the Division Chief of Geriatrics and Internal Medicine in Galveston. Great presenter. One of his presentations was bad drugs. It may not be dementia, it may be your medication. He did a fabulous job. And we wondered who all would watch that. You know, some of our best viewers on this who were most interested were people who were over 70. They want to be informed. Last night I was at a film festival that we have, and we had probably about 20 senior citizens who were there to learn about medications. And the other really good video that we have is by Carrie Allen. She's a PharmD, and she does Help My Mother's on Drugs. It's a very good one. It's good for family members to watch. I think it's good for some of our staff to watch, just to be more aware, because she provides such detailed, excellent information. So I hope you'll watch that. And then once a month, we also have a free live webcast called Training Delivered to You. We're changing the title in 2011 to I Care. But in Training Delivered to You, other issues, for instance, next week, the issue that we're going to present is family dynamics and dementia. That continues to be one of the areas where people want the most information from us. Now, when you click onto the free videos, you're going to see something like this, and you'll be able to go through all the pages to see the different videos that we have. Well, you know what one of our most popular videos is? I'm a little embarrassed to tell you. It's What Men Need to Know, Erectile Dysfunction. People who would never talk about this with their families or will watch this. And that was one of the films we showed yesterday at our film festival. The room was full, primarily with women. And he also talks about other things like enlarged prostate cancer, but they were there for the entire 45-minute video. People really do want to get informed, and these were people who were primarily in their 80s. Oh, and what's one of the major problems for older adults? It's falls. We have Safe at Home, which is a national curriculum. It's presented by Tracy Zirkle, who was with Oasis in San Antonio. It's a 3-part series about making your home safer and things that we can all do to reduce the risk of falls in our homes. Excellent one. And then we have another one, and I think it's called A New Look at an Old Problem, and it's about falls, and it's done by Maria Wellish. It's about an hour. It's excellent training for people who are working in adult daycare centers, for people who are working in home health, and people who are working in nursing homes. Did you know we have a facility in Uvalde? Isn't that a beautiful place? We think sometimes in San Antonio that we don't have enough resources. Well, it's really tough to have resources in some rural areas. So we were invited by the community of Uvalde to establish a resource center there, and it's the Georgie Briscoe Resource Center. We were fortunate enough that Governor Briscoe allowed us to use his mother's house through St. Philip's Church. And we have really developed quite a network to serve caregivers in South Texas. One of our communities that's most involved is McGown. And they've participated in our spirituality and aging. We had a training marathon. They participated in that. They participate in our monthly webcast. We have a lot of people in Alaska who watch us. We have a lady and her staff from Homer, Alaska. They're 250 miles away from a small town, so you know how hard it is for them to get training. They use our training to keep their staff development up. Okay, one of the things that we were not good at, well, that was keeping people informed about who we are. We have way too many names. We're the Elizabeth McGowan Training Institute. We're Morningside Ministries. We're the Georgie Briscoe Resource Center. I want you to just forget that. I want you to remember mmlearn.org. It's morningsideministrieslearn.org. If you remember that, you will always be able to find us. So, say this with me. I just want you to remember it. mmlearn.org. While we serve healthcare providers and families and pastoral care providers, one of course, our main emphasis is on supporting the family caregiver. And today we're talking about the baby boomers. And the baby boomers are right now in the middle of caregiving. And who are they caring for? Some of them are caring for other baby boomers, maybe a spouse, a sibling. But they're primarily caring for the veteran generation, their families. And when you think of that, those are two very different generations. And as we all get older, some of those generational differences can become a little bit more defined. So it's good for us to be aware of the historical and other experiences that people had as the care recipient and as the caregiver. Almost, and I'm sure this is not a surprise to you at all, most caregivers are female. Most are about 46 years old. You know, they're also working. They're also probably taking care of some kids at home, or maybe they're part of the boomerang generation of children, or the boomerang generation, and they've come back home. So this generation has really been sandwiched between caring for their parents and caring for children, even as adult children. Most caregivers have been caring for someone for about 4.6 years, and they're going to spend about 20 hours a week in caregiving. That's a lot, and usually that's on top of everything else that they're doing. One of the greatest areas of concern is the older caregiver, because they're usually doing it alone. You know, older adults don't want to burden their parents, their children. They don't want to say, I really need your help, because they don't want to interfere with their lives. So older caregivers often are doing it alone. And yesterday in that film festival, we had one film that was, I don't have dementia, but it's driving me crazy. We had 23 people in their late 70s and early 80s watching this, because either they were concerned that their spouse is in the early stages of dementia, or they're already in dementia. There was a man there that I'd seen throughout the day with his wife, and she obviously had dementia, and he is at a loss. You know, I hardly knew how to take care of my children when they were born, and we can read lots of books about that, but we don't get much information about how to take care of an older adult. And when we talk about the generational changes, and what really happens is that when those adult children come back to care for the parents, everything that happened in their childhood kind of comes back together. They're not really that 48-year-old woman. They may be having some of the emotions and the conflicts with their siblings that they experienced when they were 9 or 12. I love a statement by Francine Russo who says, when siblings come together to make decisions about medical care for their parents, it's like throwing them into a nuclear reactor and saying, figure it out. And you know, that's about all we do sometimes. Okay. As you would probably know, I'm sure you know this, most people are going to care for a family member, but a pretty good number of people are not only going to care for one older adult, they're going to care for two, because their parents are going to be very close in the same age. Their health is declining, sometimes normally, but many of them are going to have two family members to care for. Okay, let's go to the next one. The burden of caregiving. I think this is pretty understandable and clear, but the longer someone has been caring for a loved one, and the more complicated their health issues are, the more stressful it's going to be for them. It takes them away from their support system. I talked to a woman this morning, Susan Pete, who's with the Senior Directory, who told me about someone she knows who's older, who takes care of her husband, has always been a very private person, doesn't like to share or depend on other people, and this woman is becoming more and more isolated because she doesn't want to ask anyone to take care of her husband who has dementia. In his case, there are some wandering issues, so she's always afraid that he's going to leave. And I want to let you know that we do have a really great video. It's about an hour on wandering and elopement. It's excellent. It's good for facilities. It's nursing homes. It's very good for adult daycare. It's good for families on how to make your home safer for someone who may have wandering and elopement problems. I'm sure the depression and mental health statistics for caregivers are profound. And this is a statement that I just loved. It's not in your handout in your book, but I was reading just an online article from a paper, and this woman who was the caregiver for her husband, who was a physicist. He spoke and wrote in multiple languages, and he had developed dementia. And it happened gradually. And she said, it's like being a frog in slowly boiling water. Sometimes you just don't know what's happening until it's there. And I really related to that. And I was glad that you had a dentist here, because a dentist really helped me see a few years back that I was under a lot of stress, and I just wasn't smart enough to know that I was under stress. I think it was in January, maybe early February, and my cap came off my tooth. So I went in to have it put back on, and my dentist said, well, this is kind of unusual. You know, you don't have a history of grinding your teeth, but have you been under any stress? I said, no, I haven't been under any stress. So he fixed it, and I went back, and about 6 weeks to 8 weeks later, it came off again. So I go back to the dentist, and he said, something is wrong. I think you're grinding your teeth. I said, well, maybe I am. Are you under any stress? No, I don't think so. He said, well, why don't you tell me what's been happening in your life? I said, well, I'm working full-time. I'm going to school full-time. My daughter's in London. I worry about her sometimes. My husband's in a foreign country, and he has bodyguards. And my single, unmarried daughter just moved in with me with her 2 dogs, and she's going to have a baby. Well, I didn't think I was under any stress. I really had not thought about that. And my father had just died. I did not think, you know, life just happens to us. And it took someone saying that to me to get me to stop and say, you know, maybe I do have a little bit of stress. And it at least got me to slow down and take a little bit better care of myself and not say yes to everything at that time. Everybody in this room has that opportunity to help a caregiver realize maybe the water is boiling and we need to get out of the pot at least once in a while. 40% of family caregivers have some sign of mental distress. I think maybe in the general population it may be pretty high too. And I like this one. This is actually a Canadian statistic. 1 in 5 baby boomers can expect to fall prey to dementia. Well, that's another reason we better be concerned about caregivers, because baby boomers are going to need caregivers, and we need to be setting into place caregiver training systems now so that when we're at that point, those of us who are in the baby boom generation, and there are so many of us, that we have family members and others and systems that will provide care for us. And I think we've talked about this, how high depression and suicide rates can be among caregivers of older adults. This is a statistic or a fact that is of interest to me. Well, we'll go back to that, huh? This is where I meant to be. I have this photo up because this is my mom and dad, and this was when I was probably about 8 years old. And caregivers do have higher rates of chronic health conditions, and they also have higher rates of depression and premature death, and especially spouses of older adults. That happened to both of my parents. My mother died 4 months after my grandmother died. She was her primary caregiver. My dad died 6 months, not 6 months, 6 weeks after his wife died. And they had it wasn't an issue of them having someone to help them care. It was just them taking on so much of the responsibility and not being able to release it. Caregivers often don't keep up with their own medical appointments. They don't eat right. They don't do the things that they need. And then their systems, their bodies are just depleted by the time their loved one dies. Now this says that only 17% of caregivers say that their health has gotten worse. Well, that's self-reporting. I don't think, most of them don't go to have their regular checkups. So I think they're like that person jumping the frog in the slowly boiling water. They don't even know that their health isn't as good as it should be. And of course, we've talked about this, the longer someone has been caring for an older adult and the more involved their medical problems, the more likely it is that they're going to have health problems themselves. And it not only affects the health of caregivers, and this applies especially to women, being a health care provider, a family caregiver for an older adult, often they're going to start by just missing some work. That's not uncommon at all. Then next, they may reduce their hours. Sometimes, and it's women in particular, will feel they can't accept a promotion because maybe there'd be increased responsibility, or maybe it would take them away from their location where it's more convenient for them to care for a loved one. So in the end, because they will have reduced income, current income, or they'll have reduced investment in their retirement, it's going to have a significant impact, in particular on women, economically. Okay, most caregivers don't get training. And the higher the burden, the more training they need. I thought this was kind of interesting. It says that caregivers in high burden situations particularly want help or information, but look, the ones in low care, it's 73%. Everybody wants to know how to do a better job. You know, a lot of people are, when they come to this point in their life, they're very proficient in their job, they're professionals, they know what to do, and then they're thrown into this situation that they didn't prepare for, and they're asked to do things that they have really no base of knowledge to face. These are the things that caregivers have said that they want. They want to know how to keep their loved ones safe at home. And we have videos that address that. They want to know about managing their own stress. And they want easy activities to do at home. We have something about stress, and we have things about activities at home. And they want to find time for themselves. This is a longer list of what family caregivers say that they want. The things that we have not covered yet are choosing home health care agencies, choosing assisted living nursing homes. In November, we will be covering that. The other thing that we haven't covered yet, although we have a lot of information on UTIs, we have not covered managing incontinence. We'll cover that in 2011. And you know, since I've been working in long-term care, and this is another thing I'm a little uncomfortable, but I have never heard so much talk about BMs and poop in all my life. It is something I hear about every day. So next year we're going to do, and you'll want to watch it because I'm sure it's going to be funny and informative, it's going to be the ABCs of BMs. And who's going to provide the information? Who are the family caregivers going to go to? Well, they're going to go to their doctors. They're going to go to the nurses. They're going to go to other healthcare professionals. But are those people really going to have very much time to do training and information for them? I think it's pretty unrealistic to think that those medical professionals will be able to do the education that the family would like to receive. So we found that about half of all caregivers are using the internet to get information about caregiving. And most people will tell you, well, that's just not going to be true for older adults. Yesterday, I spoke to a group of walkers, mall walkers. They were the most with it group that I've spoken to in quite a while. They were mostly in their late 70s and their early 80s. And after I left that meeting and telling them about our free videos, they had great questions. They were very informed people. We had a big spike in views, and you know, I actually think it's from those because they are active internet users. I don't think we should discount what value that it could be for the older caregiver. The other thing is when people are really in the midst of caregiving, they often are isolated, and if we don't provide training on the internet, it's unlikely they're going to get any training. One of the things that we've tried to do, especially in rural areas, is make available DVDs because almost everybody has a DVD player. And the other great thing is that there's nothing, I don't think there's anything like being in a classroom with people and having the presenter there with you to respond to questions. But when you're a caregiver, will you have time? Can you get respite care at that time of the day and make it to that training? If you're in a rural area, how far will you have to drive to get any training? The other thing I think that's really neat about the training that we provide is that on our live webcast, you can ask questions in real time. And then on our on-demand sessions, you can also email your questions in and someone will respond to you within 72 hours. Most people are going to look for information about the condition, the illness that their family member has. They're going to look for, 58% are going to look for services. They're going to look for information about care facilities. This is where I think we come in. They're going to look for information about caregiving tasks. You know, I showed you that list of I think it's like 14 topics that family caregivers want to know about. Well, that's what they think they want to know, and we believe that's really important. But sometimes it takes a while to know what you really need to know. So we respond to the data that has been collected to say what caregivers want, but we also talk with other caregivers to find out what practical things they actually really needed to know while they were a caregiver. And the last part is 13% look for support for themselves as caregivers. I think that's for us the hardest thing to do online because we can't be there. That's why I think support groups are so important. We do have a series of videos called Caregivers on Demand, COD, and it's a group of women who just talk about what their experience as caregivers were, and they're not all sheroes. Life wasn't just perfect for them. They talk about how difficult it was, the family conflicts they had, financial difficulties. We tried to have some real world stories so that people could relate to that. One of the things that we've heard caregivers of a loved one with dementia say is, well, Nancy Reagan could do it, so I could do it. Well, we always try to remind them that is a wonderful story. But I think she probably had 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week care. So we need to be forgiving of ourselves when we're caregivers. We have a great one, the one that's, I don't have dementia, but it's driving me crazy. And a lot of it is helping caregivers deal with that they are doing the best that they can, and that what they are doing is good because it is the best they can. And we're going to give them some practical tools to use, but caregivers carry a lot of guilt around with them. Okay, one of the things we try to do is base our videos on best practices and research, and I thought we'd use this one as an example. This example is wheelchair transfers. We have them in English and Spanish. One is a wheelchair transfer to a car and back, to a toilet and back, and to a shower tub and back. And the script was written by a physical therapist at the Health Science Center. He was on site when we filmed it. He went through the series of edits that we did and approve the final version. So what we have is actually excellent training. That's not on the list of what caregivers say they need to know, but we see that. It looks so easy when you pick a loved one up at the hospital and they get them in the car, and then that woman or man gets home and they think, okay, how am I going to do this? So they can watch this video before they go. In some of our hospitals, the discharge case managers and nurses are giving them, we have a prescription pads, and you're welcome to take these, so that they'll say, okay, we want you to watch this before you come back tomorrow. But you know what's also really great is that if you go to a class, you're going to hear it one time probably. You may be participating in it once. But with this one, you can watch it over and over again, and it's only about 6 minutes. And if there are particular parts that you don't understand or you're not recalling, then you can just watch that particular part, because it's chaptered in a way that you can locate where you need to review the information. We also have a video that's called How to Change the Bed with Someone in It. And that's a really good one. And it's done in someone's house who doesn't have anything special. You know, how do they protect their mattress? Well, they go get a garbage bag. How do they do many of those things? They just say, what do we have in the house that we can use to help us do that? And again, that was a physical therapist went through that entire process for us to be sure that it was a good one. Okay, so this is what our webcast is going to look like. I like to use this one with Dr. Weiss. He's a geriatric psychiatrist here in San Antonio. He's also an Alzheimer's researcher. Do you know when we had the highest number of views in an hour? It was one of his. And do you know what it was? Alcoholism and the elderly. We had, I think, 380, 390 views. And we don't have a huge system to promote what we have, although we're getting much better. People were so interested in that. And it's really an interesting one. He talks about some research about how many falls that ends up with someone going to the hospital are actually related to alcohol. And one of the things he shared that I'd never thought about, that someone with early onset dementia may have a drink of wine and then for dinner or before dinner, and then they'll eat, and then they'll say, well, I think I'll have a glass of wine. And they don't remember that they had had one. And then they leave the table. Well, I think I'll have a glass of wine. And so they have another glass of wine. So he said that's really something to be concerned about. And you know what else he told me? And this is something to remember about baby boomers. The baby boomers were the psychedelic generation. And this was his theory, and I think we better watch out for this. He said that he thinks that it may be true that as baby boomers age, there will be a higher level of substance abuse because of their teenage and young adult years. They'll just be more open to that. So, I'm trying to get my daughters to watch all of these. Okay, and I think I did tell you that we have an ask function so that people can send in questions, whether it's live or on demand. And we also have a survey that we ask everyone to complete. We've had about 950 surveys completed this year. We've been analyzing those, but we'll look at them at the end of the year, and that'll, in November and December, we're doing our planning for 2011, and that will help guide us in what we want to do in the coming year. Okay, it is really important that we train these caregivers, these baby boomer caregivers, because we're going to have so many of them are going to need care as they age. And if we set a good example with this generation as baby boomers, we will have education systems in place for the family caregiver so that this generation hopefully won't have the same sibling conflicts, won't carry around the same guilt, and will have the tools and the skills that they need to take care of their parents or other loved ones. And if it's not Generation X, It's going to be Generation Y. So that's really all I have to present to you. I hope that you'll use our website. We talked in a webcast today with some healthcare agencies in South Texas. One is using our videos for their family caregivers. They bring them together on a Saturday or in the evening, and they provide them with training. It's an additional service that they can provide to the family, which is also a good value-added product for them. But you know, when the families are better informed and they understand dementia or the illness or the condition more, they're going to be easier to work with. They're not going to be as frustrated. They're going to maybe understand that it's the disease of dementia that's causing the problems, not their mother or their father. Do you have any questions?
You've made mention of respite care, and of course having respite care to accomplish this kind of training for caregivers is, I think, really pretty damned important. But it seems to me that in a broader general sense, respite care has almost become a popularity item when, in order to keep this situation stable, not only do we need training, but what we really need is a daily attendant, so that the person who's doing the caregiving has this place to look at themselves and reevaluate their lives and you know, sort of rejuvenate themselves every day for 2 hours.
Oh, I think so.
And it seems to me like that we've sort of put our assets towards things that generate, you know, for a public institution saying, you know, or a state institution paying for respite, when what we really needed was the real important piece was to put it in attendant care, because I would suspect that if you did outcome measures on this, that if you could measurably see decreases in abandonment, you know, suicide rates or, you know, depression rates in the providers as well as in the recipients of the care, it would be related, it would be highly correlated with attendant care and not necessarily respite.
Well, I think that's, I don't have any research on that, but I do think that's true.
Okay.
And families don't have resources, or with my family, they lived in kind of a rural area. Sometimes it was just hard to find someone to provide the care, even if the resources were there to provide for it. It was just tough to find the right person to do it.
Do you have suggestions in terms of how we're going to extend these kinds of publicly supported services, either directly or through contractors, into rural areas in a state like Texas, which has huge rural areas?
You know, I wish I had that solution. I'm going to ask you guys what you're doing in your communities and what you see as maybe some options. Does anyone have something that's working in your community? Because we do not provide any respite care. Other siblings? Mm-hmm. He's saying that sibling sharing in the care of their parents is one of the answers. I think it is, but not all families have the cohesiveness to do that. ACOG does, and all the AAAs do. In Uvalde, we've been really fortunate to work with the AAA there, and they provide respite so that family caregivers who don't have access to the internet can come and participate in training online on site at the Georgia Briscoe Resource Center. We could not provide that, though. And the VA hospital, I think there are a lot of people who don't know about their VA benefits. So you might be a good person for them to talk to today.
The best person to talk to is the benefits counselor.
Okay.
They know everything. That's their
You're going to have two speakers at the end of the day, Dr. Craig Klugman and Dr. Jason Schillerstrom. You're going to love them, and you know what? You will not be able to get enough of the information that they have. So at the end of the day, or when you go back to your office and you want to share that information, guess what? You'll find it on mmlearn.org. And hello, Sharon. Well, that's all I have. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I hope you'll take some of these prescription pads just to start saying to the family members that you're working with, watch this, because the more they understand about dementia or the disease, the condition, the better it's going to be for them and for the person they care for. Thank you.
Buenas noches, iniciamos con noticias de última hora. Les saluda Brenda Jiménez.
Y Jorge Núñez. Pues ¿estará usted de acuerdo que nuestra cultura nos enseña a respetar a las personas de la tercera edad? Pero no siempre es fácil cuidarlos durante la etapa de la vejez.
Por esa razón, líderes en el campo médico se reunieron bajo el mismo techo el día de hoy y Anabel Monge nos explica más.
Así es, Jorge Brenda. Según los expertos, el cuidado para las personas de la tercera edad puede convertirse aún más difícil si ellos viven con algún problema físico o quizá alguna enfermedad. Para la mayoría de las culturas, los abuelos son preciados miembros de la familia, pero a la vez todos sabemos que el envejecer no siempre es fácil. Esta etapa puede llegar a ser más frustrante cuando la persona de la tercera edad vive con problemas físicos o demencia.
Comunicando con una persona o diciéndole que necesita ayuda o que quiere comer, por ejemplo, puede ser algo bien difícil para una persona que tiene la enfermedad.
Los expertos indican que los problemas físicos y el dolor crónico disminuyen las capacidades y aumentan el estrés y la ansiedad, no solo para el paciente, sino también para la persona que le está prestando cuidado médico o emocional.
Y es muy importante que las personas que los cuidan, que se educan sobre la enfermedad y qué pueden hacer.
Con la meta de educar a la comunidad y en especial a los integrantes del campo médico, hoy viernes en San Antonio se realizó un foro informativo donde mediante discusiones detalladas se habló sobre las diferentes enfermedades que afectan a las personas de la tercera edad y cómo sobrellevarlas.
Es muy importante educarnos, saber qué podemos hacer, saber que conectamos con la Asociación de Alzheimer's, en conectarnos con tipos, con grupos de apoyo.
Y bueno, aunque este foro informativo se realizó aquí en el centro de la ciudad de San Antonio, la sesión contó con la presencia de varios expertos de a través de toda la nación. Anabel Monge, Noticias 41,